G'day and welcome to Gardening Australia. I'm back at Sydney TAFE to check on how the students are using the produce from the garden beds that I helped them set up a couple of months ago. But first, let's have a look at what else is on this week's show.
This is the rugged coastline of Yallinga, not far from Margaret River. The native bushland down here is remarkable, but we've cleared a lot of it for agriculture. And I'm meeting a bloke who's busy putting it back by regenerating his own block.
As our suburbs and cities become more populated, shade becomes a greater issue for gardeners. It can be a real challenge to find plants that not only grow in the shade, but flower in it as well.
This building is called the Museum of Economic Botany because it's a museum that lets us understand the uses of plants. So plants for food, fibre, medicine, shelter, tools, dyes, all sorts of things.
I'm a bit of an old school gardener, and I'm always on the lookout for traditional gardening techniques to improve my plot. While the Egyptians, the Greeks and the Romans are celebrated for their agricultural advancements, south of the border, down Mexico way, the Aztecs were developing their own successful systems and crops. The Aztecs introduced us to avocados, quinoa, chocolate, as well as a whole range of really tasty crops. But in my opinion, their true gift to us was their agricultural practices that are still really relevant to us backyard gardeners today. The Aztecs were masters at turning difficult sites like sloping land, marshes and shallow lakes into productive patches. And the secret was that they used silt out of the shallow lakes, as well as manures, their own included. I'm not going to do that today, but they also used charcoal, which is an amazing substance that actually grabs nutrient and moisture to it and releases it, making it available to the plants. If you're going to use charcoal, it can be a good idea to supercharge it. Now to do this, I've put some charcoal in a bucket of water and then added some compost. You can add fish emulsion or any fertilizer. And then all you have to do is give it a good stir and let it sit overnight. To use the charcoal, the first thing I need to do is dig a trench about the depth of a shovel. Now I'm pouring in a thin layer of the supercharged slurry. I'm mixing through some animal manure into the soil from the trench, and then I've just got to backfill. The way this system works is the nutrient, in this case the manure, leaches down through the soil profile, but the charcoal acts as a barrier and captures that nutrient and then releases it slowly as the plants need it. Favourite crop of the Aztecs here, corn. They liked it so much they actually devoted one of their major gods to it. So, I'm just going to plant it out. As I said, the Aztecs were smart cookies. Rather than planting one crop in a space like this, they practiced a technique called milpa, what we know today as the Three Sisters, where you plant 3 crops in the one space, all for mutually beneficial reasons. The first crop to go in the ground was corn, closely followed by cucurbit. In this case, I've got rock melon, but you can use any creeping cucurbit like small squashes or pumpkins. These will shade the ground, protecting the soil and stopping the loss of water. And then those crops are followed by a crop of climbing beans at the base of each corn. But I've learned you need to wait to plant your beans until your corn are up to about 20 centimetres or so. So the corn act as the supports for the beans, and the beans in turn fix nitrogen back into the soil, which is food for the rest of the crops. As my final homage to the Aztecs, I'm going to plant a really underrated crop, the tomatillos. They're a relative of the tomato, and in fact the Aztecs used these in preference to tomatoes for things like their salsas. Now they're quite frost tender, so sow your seed or plant your plants after the risk of the last frost. And the other thing is they're really poor pollinators. So you need to plant quite a few to get a decent crop. With the Aztecs being such a successful agricultural society, I reckon there's nothing wrong with bringing some of their ancient gardening methods to the modern world. As the Aztecs used to say, Tortazki, which means, see you later.
As our suburbs and cities become more populated, shade becomes a greater issue for gardeners. It can be a real challenge to find plants that not only grow in the shade, but flower in it as well. Justicia carnea, the Brazilian plume flower. It's a stellar performer in such a spot. It's a shade-loving, soft-wooded shrub to about 1.5 metres to 2 metres tall. It has these wonderful plume-like flowers that stand up above the shrub, and they flower from early summer right through into autumn. You even get a few spot flowerings in winter. Now, there is a white-flowered form as well. It's pretty spectacular, but it's a little bit harder to find. And I like these glossy green leaves. They're a feature in themselves. Plant it in half to full shade and it will thrive. While it will grow on the sniff of an oily rag, giving it a bit of extra water and all-purpose fertiliser in the hottest part of the year, that will increase the number of flowers. That's Justicia carnea, the Brazilian plume flower, a perfect shade lover.
This is one of my favourite places to visit and to get back to nature. The rugged coastline of Yallingup in the southwest corner of WA. It's a good 250 kilometres south of Perth, not far from Margaret River. The native bushland down here is remarkable. In fact, around 80% of the plant species don't occur anywhere else in the world, but we've cleared a lot of it for agriculture. And today, I'm meeting a bloke who's busy putting it back by regenerating his own block, a former sheep farm. So tell us a bit about the property, Barry.
Well, we're on 2.5 acres or 1 hectare. It's an old sheep farm. And when we first moved in here in 2005, there was absolutely nothing here.
Really?
It was just all bare, barren.
My God, you've done some work.
Yeah, there's a lot of hard work gone into this.
So Barry, how'd you go from pasture weeds like this to, you know, dense canopy?
I sourced some native nurseries in the area, the local community nurseries, and I collected seedlings from them, and I found out what I needed to put in this area. So basically we just filled up these fence sections that we protected from the roos and the rabbits, and just started planting everything in the bags, and away it went.
Let's get in there and have a closer look.
Yeah.
When reintroducing local species, sourcing plants propagated from local seed is an important consideration. Local populations can be genetically distinct from populations only a few hundred kilometres away. Local conservation means preserving local genetic diversity.
These were the first jarrahs I planted on the block.
How long ago?
11 years ago now.
They're doing well.
They're doing really well. I'm really happy with it.
And originally they were right through this area, weren't they, with the marries as well?
Yeah, jarrah, marri, blackbutt down along the creek line.
So tell us a bit about the sort of mid-story that you're creating now, Barry.
Well, I'm trying to get this all happening as well, which you can see it is. I've got the kunzia, the Spiridium globulosum, the acacias.
Tell us a bit about this hakea here. This is a local one, isn't it?
Yep, Hakea lysiocarpa, and black cockatoos absolutely love this bush.
Do they want to come in and feed on the seed heads, the pods?
Every year they come in here, they rip open the seed pods, break off branches, and they really get into it. They tuck right into this bush.
Gee, it's a beautiful flower, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Really, the focus of Barry's property and the work that he's done is about providing habitat, and that comes in many forms. There's the extensive plantings, hollow logs, stone walls for lizards, bird boxes, and even enclosures where local ringtail possums are rehabilitated and released.
What we do is my wife raises the possums in the house first, then we bring them down here when they're big enough and old enough to live outside, And they stay in here for a little while, get used to the surroundings and eat the food that we provide. And then when they're big enough and old enough, we open the cage and they can come out through that little door and run along the walkways and help themselves to whatever they want to do in this area. They'll feed on the blackbutts, the jarrahs, the acacia saligna, and basically they become self-sufficient. So they come and go as they please now. So it's very rewarding. Okay, and here we are at the top of the block with the original remnant bush that was on the property in the beginning. And as you can see, the sheep have completely grazed this area out, but we are starting to see the Hyberdias come back and a lot of understory is starting to come back again.
So just by keeping the sheep out, you're seeing stuff spring back?
Ever since they've been gone, it's just very slowly started to grow back and all the understory has come back.
So what's driving you to do this?
Well, we just love, we love the bush and everything around here. We love the wildlife. What was here is all gone and we're trying to get it back. I'm learning all the time and it'll take a long time, but we'll get there eventually and we'll have a nice balanced ecosystem.
The reward for all of the hard work for Barry and his wife Julia is being able to enjoy the view that they've created and to take in the transformed landscape that's full of life.
When we first moved to the property, there was probably a few blue wrens, some crows and magpies and a couple of 28s. But over the years, the numbers have steadily increased, and as the trees have grown and matured, we've seen the bird population explode, and we've got over 25 species of birds living on the block now permanently. It's fantastic to see it.
So if your passion fruit are falling before the fruit have properly formed, it's possible that they weren't pollinated in the first place, but it's much more likely to be a feature of inconsistent watering. Too much, too little, or variable applications of water can also cause the fruit to drop. So really, if you can plant a pollen partner, do that, and if you give them care, make sure that it is consistent, and then you should get some decent fruiting.
How often should I fertilise potted plants? Well, all potted plants with their roots in pots are restricted. They really are dependent upon you for water and fertiliser. And the fertiliser that's in the potting mix really only lasts 3 to 6 months at a maximum. So I would be re-adding every 3 months the controlled release fertiliser, and then they'll be away and very happy.
Can I grow veggies in the shade? Well, it depends on how much shade and what type of veggies. I've found that things like potatoes and spinach don't do too badly, but any veggies' growth will be slowed and they're more open to attack by pests and diseases. And always remember, when growing plants in the shade, you don't have to water them so much as those that are growing in full sun.
Earlier this year, I collaborated on a project with Sydney TAFE to build a kitchen garden here at Ultimo in the centre of Sydney. It's been 4 months and it's time to have a look at how the first crop is coming along. Now, the plants are actually going along really well. We've got the 2 different types of parsley, they're thriving. Over here, the silver beet and beetroot are growing really nicely side by side, and the lettuces have just spread like wildfire. There's good produce here. Time to catch up with Fiona McLean, head teacher of hospitality, who's running the project.
We've integrated the garden into our Certificate 3 and Certificate 4 commercial cookery course. Their sustainability unit is taught around the garden. We also have menu planning where we're teaching them about seasonal produce. So you've got a cuttlefish salad with fennel on the menu today. So I think it'd be really good maybe if we take a little bit of the fennel tips here. Let's cut those off.
So Jung, what have you harvested from the garden today?
I have some parsley, some fennel, and some lettuce with a green color and a little bit purple color.
Yeah.
You get to know how old it is, and it's guaranteed freshness. Especially with the herbs, I think that's what's most important for herbs, is unless you're drying them, but of course fresh herbs, a nice fresh taste. You get to see the vibrance of the colour.
Did you think that you would see this space become a garden?
No, I don't think so. It's all the thing, all the building. How can you growing up here? And just like, wow, amazing.
Do you think this garden is important for your learning as a chef?
Yes, I think so. You know, we are studying menu planning now, and it's good to know which plant gonna use in which season. Like, you know, sometimes you're out of season, out of stock, and it's very expensive if you're gonna be out of season. So it's better to go to like a little garden like this. Everyone can pick it easily to cook it in the kitchen.
That fennel looks fantastic.
It's nice and fresh. So we got a nice bit of cuttlefish here. We got some salt, pepper, some garlic, just a bit of crushed garlic, some chili, and a bit of thyme and olive oil. So that's been sitting there for about 30 minutes. We got our pan nice and warm there.
Yep.
So let's gonna get some olive oil.
As a Greek, I know my olive oil. How's that?
Oh, that's a bit too much.
Too much. See, we splash it around.
We took it out of the ocean. We don't want to put it back in. So we got everything ready for a salad. So what we're going to do, it's very simple. Salads are always very simple. So we got the fennel, we got some lettuce here, we got some beets here.
The colours are coming through now, aren't they?
Yeah, so we got that. We're just going to give it a bit of a toss. Just get that stacked in nice and tight. Put our cuttlefish on top so you can see it. And then that can just go on there as a nice little garnish, I guess. And then finally, drizzle with a bit of olive oil. And there we go. We got our cuttlefish crispy pancetta, and we got our fennel from the garden and our mix. I think it was beet leaves and a bit of lettuce in there, and citrus vinaigrette.
I don't know where Brent's gone. He's busy doing other things, but someone's going to have to taste test this.
I feel like more respect to the grown-up. It's very hard to grow something up and caring about them. Yeah, and it's good to use them and respect them.
The value of having something like this, I guess, is allowing the students to see where we get these herbs, getting a feel for what it's like to harvest crops, and also getting them to like be able to just taste fresh herbs. So I guess that's good.
The garden here at TAFE is an exciting project, and I look forward to watching it grow.
A lot of people would be familiar with cotton being a crop, but not everybody has actually seen cotton plants growing. This is Levant cotton. It's not the common cotton of commerce. This is one of the original varieties, Gossypium herbaceum. These plants are about a year old, and the reason I grew them is because somebody gave me some seed 10 years ago, and I've stored it in a seed store ever since. And I thought it was a good idea to grow the plants and put some fresh seed back in the store. When I had a recent open day, people were saying, what was I growing? Was I growing a shrubby version of a Venus flytrap? Because they saw these bracts which surround the seed heads. But this is a fully grown cotton plant. Now, sitting here is one of the worst enemies of the cotton plant. This is the cotton harlequin bug. Now, a single bug is not going to become a parent, so I don't really need to worry. But if you do notice many of these, they will spread from cotton plants onto hibiscus. So it's a good idea to pick them off. The plant produces some really attractive hibiscus-like flowers, and they attract butterflies and bees into the garden. The seed, when they're fresh, you can actually cook and use as a food, rather like lentils. So it's a curiosity as much as anything else. But of course the prize is this fluff, this cotton, which surrounds the seeds. It catches on things, and that's how the cotton plant gets moved around. It spreads itself by use of this fabric. But inside, there's the seed, and there's next year's crop. And this is going into my seed bank.
My name's Tony Canellis and I'm the curator of the Museum of Economic Botany and the Cultural Collections Manager. This building is called the Museum of Economic Botany because it's a museum that lets us understand the significance and importance of plants. It's not about economics, it's not about making money from plants, it's about the uses of plants. So plants for food, fibre, medicine, shelter, tools, musical instruments, dyes, all sorts of things. In the 1840s, the Kew Botanic Gardens, which is essentially the granddaddy of botanic gardens for the British Empire anyway, set up the first museum. And wherever they went, wherever the British went, they would establish colonies, and in those colonies there'd be botanic gardens, and within those botanic gardens there'd be these museums that would show people what they should be planting to form the colony. These are the most amazing objects in this museum. These models are made out of paper mache. They were made by a German company and they created these models to instruct horticulturists and farmers about the different varieties, how to identify what to plant, and they were designed to be robust so they could be put on display or handled. And they ended up making sets like this and distributed them through to universities, horticultural institutions, museums. They were exhibited at the international exhibitions, and we're very fortunate to have the only collection outside of Europe. These displays here show the sequence of evolution for the plant world. So it's a very scientific display, but what we've done is along the way we tell some really interesting stories. So if we look at a case like this, we have the Cochrane-Ng. The Latin name means good rump, and there's a story behind that. The Cochrane-Ng grows on two tiny islands in the Seychelles. Occasionally a seed would be floating on the ocean. And in the 18th century, sailors would see that and say, well, there's a mermaid, I'm going for it. And then they'd be bitterly disappointed when it wasn't a mermaid, but they'd have this object, they'd take it home, tell the story, have a laugh about it, and somehow wealthy collectors heard this story and they started to say, I need one of those. And so there was a huge demand in this seed, which happens to be the largest seed in the world. This is one of the more intriguing objects in the museum. It looks like a simple piece of lace, but it's actually made out of pineapple fibre. And that's quite amazing. We all know the pineapple, we eat it, we enjoy it. But the purpose of this museum, which is all about getting the most out of the plant resources, includes things like avoiding waste by being ingenious, and making beautiful lace is the way it's done in the Philippines. I love working here because the things that I care about the most, which are objects, stuff, I love science, and I love art. And those three things come together in this place. So for a person like me with my interests and my background, this is a dream job. One of my favourite things in this museum is this very humble display of cinchona bark and the powerful story that comes behind it. So cinchona is the source of quinine, and quinine is the anti-malarial drug. Now, that saved hundreds of thousands of lives. If you're a British soldier, you had more chance of dying from a mosquito than an enemy bullet. And so the British would issue tonic water, which contains a quinine, after dinner. Now, tonic water tastes quite bitter. So enlisted men got tonic water, but officers got gin and tonic. And I think that's a really nice story. Plants are fundamental to our existence. The most obvious one is oxygen. Without photosynthesis, no oxygen, so we won't breathe. Without plants, we won't eat. If we don't eat, we don't live. So the basic fundamentals of life are embedded in the plant world. This is the last museum of its type in the world. Most people walk into this museum and it's like a time warp. However, when you look at what's on display and the messages, it's a contemporary story. The reason this museum still exists and is important is because its job hasn't been done yet. We haven't got to that point where we understand and respect the plant world enough, so we still have a role to play in that.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. If you want to learn more about Tino's story on the veggies grown by the Aztecs, grab a copy of the November issue of the Gardening Australia magazine. It's a beautiful time of the year to be out in the garden. That's where you'll find me. See ya.
Helen Pointer purchased this country estate on the Hamilton Plains over 35 years ago. And she got in and started planting the gardens around it.
Being a keen, hands-on gardener doesn't mean you can't use a professional designer to help you get the result you've always envisaged. I'm going to look at both sides of just such a relationship, and the result is terrific.
And I'm talking to a plant scientist who is a master of the mint family, a doctor of the discovery and description of new plant species that may well find a place in your garden in the future.